Hey Wargamers, today we got a really exciting preview from the Warhammer community team about how Battlesuits are going to work in the new Tau Codex. And honestly, this is a huge update. There's a ton to go through and I am really excited about it. If you've been following the channel for a while now, you know that some of these ideas that are in this preview are things we've talked about in the past. And so I am simply stoked to see them make it into the actual rule set, and the implications that those rules have for how the army is going to play as a whole are massive. So super exciting, massive update that we have to talk about today. So being a battlesuit in the past has conferred a variety of different benefits. Sometimes that's stronger, sometimes that's weaker, but I think this preview today represents the strongest version of battlesuits to date. It says that battlesuit models in this unit can make attacks with ranged weapons even when their unit is within engagement range of an enemy unit, but they can only make such attacks against enemy units that they are within engagement range of. In such circumstances, those models can target an enemy unit even if other friendly units are within engagement range of the same enemy unit. So, this is massive. This means that battlesuits can shoot into combat if they are part of that combat, which makes sense, right? Like, you're a battlesuit, you're probably like, okay, I'm in my little shell, I'm going to keep doing my battlesuit stuff. I'm going to keep shooting, which is awesome. It does mean that they can't shoot out of combat, which is a contrast to similar rules like Big Guns Never Tire for monsters and vehicles that have some mechanism built in that allow them to potentially influence units outside of their engagement range. That's important because it means if you have a giant crisis bomb, for example, that's tied up with one dude, you can't have a bunch of guys shoot outside of combat. Everybody has to shoot at that one dude if they choose to stay and shoot. However, they don't have a hit modifier, right? They don't have the same penalty for shooting into combat like vehicles do. Vehicles have to take that -1 hit modifier. There's limitations on the types of weapons they can fire. Not true for battlesuits. Battlesuits can shoot into combat with no hit modifier, full ballistic skill. All the nuts and bolts of battlesuit mechanics are brought to bear against that enemy, which can be very powerful. It does beg the question of how does this rule interact with Big Guns Never Tire? So the Riptide, for example, is a monster. If it shoots into close combat, it has a -1. Presumably, the battlesuit keyword would take precedence over that and remove that -1 modifier, which itself is a huge benefit for Riptides, but also expands that benefit to a broad range of new unit types, right? Crisis suits, stealth suits, broadsides. All of these units that previously couldn't shoot into combat now can, and that is massive. It means Tau can perform in melee. They can actually do something in close combat, even if it's not punching. They can still punch, by the way, right? They can shoot in close combat and they can punch in close combat, which is, it's a 1-2 punch. It's a one-shot, 2-punch combo, which is really good. And it means that you don't need to have a dedicated close combat suit or a dedicated close combat unit necessarily. Yes, there would be benefits associated with having such a unit in your army, but one of the big things here is that Tau can just keep being Tau. He can keep on Tauing and still do something. You can still have a presence in the game and not just wither away to an assault immediately. It means that it's possible to hold objectives, right? You can get charged on an objective and hold your own against it and actually do something to, potentially maintain that objective. It's not so good that you want to get into close combat though, right? You're like, close combat still hurts. We're not great in close combat with the exception of being able to defend against it. So you don't want to charge because you would potentially charge and then get punched and then die and never get to shoot in close combat. But if you do get charged, you have this ability to actually do some damage in that instance. So it's very much a defensive tool, but a very good one. It does stack with Mont Ka, right? So Mont Ka allows you to improve the AP of your shots and reroll ones to wound if you're within a certain range. That works in close combat. If you're in close combat, you are definitely within Mont Ka range. So that's awesome. It means your weapons are even deadlier in close combat than they could be at range. It doesn't stack with Cao Yun though. Cao Yun has a wording in it that says you cannot be within engagement range. And that, I guess that was a little bit of a hint. When I first read that, I just assumed it was them covering their bases and being very clear. But apparently that was a very intentional inclusion in the wording of Cao Yun, that Cao Yun does not work with this close combat shooting that battlesuits have now. Still, I'll take it. And especially because battlesuit weapons are strong, right? If we compare, basically any battlesuit weapon to, a run-of-the-mill close combat weapon that any, assault unit might have, they're pretty good. And if we're talking about, like a crisis suit, you can have 3 of them. Commander can have 4 of them, right? So that's a lot of damage that can be done in close combat with battlesuit weaponry, especially given the boosts that we're starting to see in these new weapon profiles. It's deadly. They're highly effective. And so that means that in a scenario where battlesuits are charged, that charger better do a lot of damage on that charge. Otherwise, they're probably not going to be around very long, right? If you charge a unit of battlesuits and don't do anything to it, assuming that their weapons are, reasonably matched for that potential charger, they're going to do really well the next turn. They're going to be able to shoot and use those weapons and potentially wipe that unit off the board. So that charger really needs to do a lot of damage on the charge. Otherwise, it's not going to work out very well for them. So very much a reinforcement of this idea that it is dangerous to charge Tau. Yes, you have Overwatch, but now you also have this. And so it almost also makes you wonder if there's going to be big changes to the way that supporting fire works or for the greater good works in a way that makes it so that maybe charging isn't as deadly as it used to be, but being an assault with Tau is. We'll have to wait and see, but this ruling itself is massive and totally changes the way that Tau can react to assault armies. We also got 2 weapon previews in today's article. One is for the burst cannon. It's still range 18, it's still strength 5, it's still 1 damage, but now it is assault 6 instead of assault 4, which is good, right? It doesn't change the range, it doesn't change the AP, but it still provides a 50% increase to the burst cannon's output, which is on par for the types of efficiency increases we saw with pulse rifles, for example, against most of their different profiles that they'd be targeting. So it's a comparable improvement to a burst cannon, but a very different one, which means that we have choices in a lot of ways. Assuming that the points work out, to be somewhat similar to the way they are now, at least in proportion to one another, you could go with a unit of fire warriors and have about the same points efficiency against a toughness 3, toughness 4 target as a fully loaded burst cannon crisis suit, right? And so there's options here. You can choose to either go the higher AP value of a pulse rifle, or you can go for the higher output of a burst cannon and still be able to do some of the same things. That's awesome. That means that there's flexibility, that means that there's choice, and that means that there isn't necessarily a trap choice, right? There's no one that's clearly better in all scenarios because they're comparable in math, and it's really more about how you want to achieve that or how you want to apply that particular tool against your opponent. Does your opponent have many models or few models, right? That's going to influence your choice here more so than the pure numbers of, what's the points efficiency of a burst cannon versus a pulse rifle against some hypothetical profile. That's good game design, I think. For the Flamer, we saw another big change. So range 12 is standard for Flamers. Now, still strength 4, still 1 damage, still hits automatically as Flamers do, but now it's assault D6 plus 2. So we get a baseline of 3 hits, basically, which improves the average number of hits you get by 2, and means that a crisis suit with 3 flamers averages about 17 hits automatically, which means 17 hits in close combat now, and also 17 hits against a horde of termagants that are coming by. That's a lot of hits against the right type of enemy. It means that Flamers have about a 57% increased output if we compare the 5.5 average to the 3.5 average that they would have had otherwise. That's about a 57% increase in output, and means that crisis suits with flamers, for example, can be really efficient against toughness 3 or toughness 4 units. Not always necessarily the most efficient, especially depending on how points work out now. But if we're using, the current points as a guideline to how things might look, flamer suits have a role, right? They have the ability to put out a lot of shots, and maybe in the new Codex, that's going to mean that it's a thing you might want to consider in your army composition. So 2 weapons that have subtle changes, but potentially very impactful ones, and ones that make either choice have a more clear application in terms of strategy, and a little bit more of a dynamic choice, a little bit more of variety in your army composition potentially. We also got a preview of the support systems, and there's a variety of support systems that we can take, right? There's a whole bunch of them, and some of them are probably going to stay pretty similar to what they were, but at least the 2 they previewed today are really different. And they both needed it, frankly. So we got to look at the multi-tracker and the target lock. The multi-tracker says each time a ranged attack made by the bearer targets a unit containing 6 or more models, an unmodified hit roll of a 6 scores 1 additional hit, maximum of 1 per model. Right? So you can't take a bunch of them to get a bunch of additional hits or anything like that. But if you take a multi-tracker, it gives you an additional hit on a roll of a 6. So exploding 6s. And that is way better than the old version, right? The old version was essentially useless, where you could reroll 1s on large units if you fire all your weapons at it, which is just dumb, frankly. And this is way, way better. It means that on average, you're going to get a 16% increase on your output when you're targeting a large unit. And that is not bad, right? Like if it's pointed correctly, that could be a big deal, especially on units that don't have to give up a hard point in order to take it, right? So if you're something like a broadside or a heavy burst cannon riptide or a storm surge, where you can take support systems and not give up anything, not give up any weapons, that is, this isn't bad, right? You have the ability to increase your output by a sizable amount, and you are going to be firing enough shots if you're a heavy burst cannon riptide or, a missile broadside or a storm surge, right? Tons of shots there. You'll get this to proc not an insignificant number of times, right? On average, you'll get to proc a 6 of your hits. So the number of hits that you're getting on those units make this potentially worthwhile. It really doesn't have much application for some of the smaller suits, though. For things like stealth suits, you could make the argument because they have weapons that now shoot 6 shots. They should, on average, get 1 additional proc. But still, if we're being realistic here, you wouldn't bring them on stealth suits. You wouldn't bring them on crisis suits. You wouldn't bring them on commanders. Those are all things where you have to give up a weapon, or at least the crisis and the commanders are things where you have to give up a weapon to take this. And then on top of it, you're just not putting out necessarily enough shots to make it worthwhile. But those other units, those big units that can take it as just kind of an accoutrement, a selection on the side, really potentially a game changer for those things, where you'll see it pretty consistently on things like storm surges, I would bet. The other support system we got a preview of was the target lock, and it says each time the bearer makes a ranged attack, the target does not receive the benefit of light cover against that attack. And so again, light cover is just the standard old cover of getting +1 to your armor save. And so if you are making a ranged attack against something in light cover, it doesn't get that benefit to its armor save, which is, again, very good. It actually means the target lock does something now, as opposed to basically removing rules that don't exist anymore. So the target lock is, again, useful. So it's particularly good on things that have long range or low mobility, units that are going to be targeting things in cover on the other side of the board where you can't necessarily get a good firing angle on. You wouldn't really necessarily need to bring this on something that is deep striking in or has the ability to maneuver around a piece of terrain or something like that. This is meant more for things that don't have that ability or aren't going to have the ability to use marker lights to do that, assuming marker lights do the same thing. And so really the target lock allows those long range, high volume of fire kind of, artillery pieces to dislodge hard to reach units that are in cover, right? So that's things like, broadsides, for example, or maybe a Riptide. Riptide's a little bit more maneuverable. You could again see this on storm surges, right? But either one of these multi-tracker target lock is going to be good on those units that are really trying to put out a lot of shots and want to be influential across the board. And so, right, like being able to take a target lock to dislodge an enemy that's in ruins on the other side of the table is pretty good, right? It feeds into the ability to deny your opponent those objective points where they might be counting on you not being able to target them very effectively. Now you kind of just can, right? This is half of a smart missile system in terms of special rules, right? Smart missile systems are able to ignore cover. We'll see how that changes with the new Codex, and ignore line of sight. And this doesn't give you the ignore line of sight, but it sure does give you the ignore cover part. And that's useful. It also means that if you take an advanced targeting system, that's a 2 armor point swing, right? You're ignoring light cover so they don't get the +1. And an advanced targeting system, assuming it does the same thing, gives you an additional -1 on your AP. So you could get some really hard hitting, large volume of fire shots on some of these models that have the ability to reach across the table. Means that Tau are going to have quite the reach and not just be, stuck in the corner, right? One of the issues right now is that it feels like even though they, supposedly have good weapons, that they're really not that impactful. This helps change that quite a bit. It's still redundant with marker lights as we understand them currently. Marker lights are one of those big 3 previews that we're still waiting on, right? We want to know about marker lights. We want to know about savior protocols, and that will really color a lot of what we're already seeing. But if marker lights stay somewhat the same in the way that they're able to remove cover, this is redundant with that. But it allows you the ability to be independent of marker lights in this way for that particular unit. That's the same as as the target lock has done for units in the past, right? When it affected your ability to move and shoot, that was something that you could also do with marker lights. And so it might be nice if it's the same thing now, but it's also totally fine if it's not. So really 2 support systems here that I think have a lot of value and have historically not been that valuable, at least in recent times. So seeing these 2 get a little bit of attention is good. It means that you're going to have a little bit more versatility and, again, more options in your army composition. You can tailor your suits to fit the role that you envision for them a little bit better. The last bit of the preview was looking at some stratagems, and the first of those is Strike and Fade. It says, use this stratagem at the start of your shooting phase. Select 1 Tau Empire jetpack unit from your army. You can shoot with that unit, and then it can make a normal move of up to 6 inches. That unit cannot shoot again this phase. If that unit contains 5 or fewer models, excluding drone models, this stratagem costs 1 CP, otherwise it costs 2 CP. So that is basically the 9th edition version of Jump Shoot Jump, which is, if you haven't played Tau for years and years, you probably aren't familiar with Jump Shoot Jump. It was this idea or this mechanic that jetpack units used to have where they could move and then shoot and then move again. And that was a staple of the way that Tau functioned for a long time. It disappeared with 8th edition, and now it's kind of back. It's had some iterations in terms of stratagems before and relics, but this really is more on the nose. It means that Tau can shoot and then move, which is essentially Jump Shoot Jump. It is cheap, right? It's 1 or 2 CP for an entire unit. And it has lots of uses. It means that you can potentially maneuver for better board control or to get onto objectives. It means that you can get into or behind terrain more easily, right? So you can take a unit of jetpack units. Again, it doesn't have to be battle suits, right? But it could be, let's say a unit of crisis suits is the quintessential example. So you take a unit of crisis suits, you can move them out in front of a ruin and then use Strike and Fade and pop them behind that ruin so they're no longer visible or targetable. That's awesome. That means that you have very little risk in actually firing your weapons if you can get behind something that prevents the opponent from shooting at you. And trust me, there will be plenty of salty players about that, because there always was and there always will be people that are salty about Tau doing things differently than the other armies, especially in this regard. It also means that you can use Strike and Fade to deny the charge, right? If you're able to move and then shoot and then move back, you can move into range, use your weaponry, and then jump out of range and potentially avoid being charged, or at least make it harder to be charged. And that too is a really big benefit. It gives you a lot more flexibility, allows you to play much more cagey than you otherwise would. Of course, it's only for one unit, and so you wouldn't be able to apply this universally. And I think that's a really big balance factor here, is it's not all battlesuits, it's not all jetpacks. It's one unit in match play per phase, which is only one phase because it specifies shooting phase. So like that's a really important part of this, right? Is that it is just one unit, but it could be a really important unit. It does reduce the risk of Maka too, right? You can jump into Maka range, so let's say turn 1, shoot off your weaponry, and then bounce back so that you're a little bit farther away, out of range of their weaponry perhaps, out of range of charging perhaps, but it means Maka can be applied a little bit more effectively. It also is good that this allows you to stay out of combat, because you can't use this in combat. It says that you have to be able to make a normal move, which means that you can't use it if you're in engagement range. That would be a fallback move. So this has to be used outside of combat, which is good too in terms of balance. It does limit its application, but again, it's 1 CP or 2 CP, right? If it's 6 models, then it's 2 CP, which is not a bad price for keeping a unit of 6 crisis suits, let's say, alive, or whatever. So I really like the pricing on this. This is something that you're probably going to use every turn. At least I'm planning on using every turn. I think this is like a really standard stratagem that you're going to want to use as much as possible, because it is that good. One of the interesting things about the wording here, though, is it says excluding drone models, as in that drones are now part of units that are not drones, which is different than it has been currently. Right now we have drones that are their own independent units, even if they're purchased alongside something like a Battlesuit. And so this suggests that either drones are just always going to cost 1 CP, right? Like maybe they're just trying to say, like, listen, drones, they don't really count. We just want you to be able to move these for 1 CP. It's not a big deal, which would also mean that drones have jetpack keyword now. But anyway, like, it either means that they're trying to make drones really easy to move, or it means that drones are part of the unit. And it seems more likely that's the latter of those two. And this is intriguing because it probably suggests that they're changing the way saber protocols work in a way to make it apply directly to the unit that they were purchased with. And that's, again, something that we've talked about in the past, is perhaps you will only be able to use saber protocols or have some benefit. Maybe it won't be called saber protocols anymore, but the benefit of drones will be limited to the models that are in the unit that purchased it. And I think that is looking more likely now, especially given the huge boost that Strike and Fade gives to the durability of battlesuits on their own, right? So yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense for them to limit the way that saber protocols works, given this change alone, plus all the other really strong benefits that battlesuits have now. The second stratagem is drop threat acquisition, which costs 3 CP or 2 CP depending on the size of the unit. Just like a side note here, it's really annoying that this is 3 CP, 2 CP, and the other one is 1 CP, 2 CP. Like, the formatting should be the same, right? They should be the lower cost and the higher cost, and they should word it in a way that's consistent with that. Anyway, it says, use this stratagem in your movement phase. When a battlesuits unit from your army is set up on the battlefield using the Manta Strike ability or the homing beacon action, Until the end of the turn, each time a Battlesuit model in that unit makes a ranged attack, you can reroll the hit roll. If that unit contains 4 or more Battlesuit models, this stratagem costs 3 CP, otherwise it costs 2 CP. And that's why it's the 3-2, is because they introduced the 3 CP first. But still, this, again, a expensive stratagem, right? If you're doing a large unit, 3 CP is expensive, but justified. Like, this makes Manta Strikes count. This means that your Crisis Bomb is good in whatever sept you take. If you're taking a Viewer Law sept, if you're taking a Dalith sept detachment, you're going to be able to use this and make that Manta Strike really effective. So I think that the CP cost is reasonable for either of those units, right? For a small unit of 3, 2 CP could be totally worth it. For a unit of 6, 7, 9 crisis suits, like, dang, 3 CP to re-roll 27 weapons, not bad. It's not a replacement, though, for some of the current mechanisms like Command and Control Node or Veteran Cadre. Like, this doesn't totally replace those, right? It means that, on the drop, you're getting a lot more utility out of them, but it doesn't replace those kind of more staple things, those consistent things you can depend on for damage output throughout the game, right? So I'd be surprised or at least disappointed if some of those more reliable sources of improving damage output were removed in favor of this. I really hope that this is more of a supplement or an augmentation on top of those other mechanisms that are currently available. It works well with Mon Ka and Cao Yun. So for Mon Ka, turns 1 through 3, you want to get close. Of course, you can't deep strike on turn 1, but for turns 2 and 3, this works out really well, right? You can deep strike, get those perks of Mon Ka, and then re-roll your hits in a way that really drives home the message of I want to do damage, right? So you can deep strike into range and benefit from Mon Ka more effectively using this. It also works well with Cao Yun because if you're able to get more hits, you're potentially getting more procs. You're potentially getting more of those Cao Yun benefits, especially in the late game when you're need a 4-up in order to get the Cao Yun perks. So, that rocks. Of course, you still have to wait till the end of the game to get that benefit, but if you did that, no, not bad. Assuming you're actually, I'll take a step back there, right? Assuming you're able to Manta Strike, because you're not able to Manta Strike in all turns of the game. And then the wording here too is a little weird, a little intriguing, if you will. It says homing beacon action. And right now, homing beacon is just something that you can put out. It makes sense that would be converted to an action, but basically suggests that the unit that has it, let's say a unit of stealth suits, has to set up the homing beacon as an action. So they're going to be dedicated to setting up that homing beacon in order to allow a different unit to come in. And that makes me wonder if there's going to be a little bit more opportunity associated with that. Maybe homing beacon will be something that isn't a one-use only deal and that you can use it multiple times, or maybe the homing beacon stays on the board or something in order to help justify that potential loss in output associated with having the homing beacon be an action that uses up your action economy for that particular unit. Only time will tell. I think it still would be, it might just be balanced just to have it be an action and not change it at all. But still, here's hoping that there's some additional perks to it because you are giving something up. So it'd be nice to get something in return. All right. So those are my thoughts. Like I said, huge update, really exciting, fundamentally changes the way the army plays. It really does feel like at this point that they're trying to make infantry better. They're trying to make battle suits better. And so again, sorry, auxiliaries, you're not part of the story this go around. Hopefully you get your own codex at some point, but this isn't it. And the army that we're looking at building is kind of that quintessential, that historic ideal of what a Tau army looks like in terms of it's got battlesuits, it's got fire warriors and devilfish, and you have them all working together in some combination that just looks like the cover of a Codex, which is cool. I can dig it. I see, clear applications for all these different tools for different units in a way that provides versatility, but also simplicity in your army design, which is exciting. I'm really interested to see how this actually translates to the tabletop. And of course, I'm also interested in what you think of this. So if you want to have a discussion, if you have ideas about things that are strong or weak here, things that you like or dislike, put them in the comments below. But if you want to have even more of a discussion, hop over to our Discord. The Invasive Wargaming Discord is the hottest club in the internet, let's say. Not really, but it's still a place that we're having a conversation. So links in the description below if you want to join us on Discord to discuss it. As always, thanks for watching and happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. A while ago I made my own miniature, and if you too want to be the proud owner of an Invasive Wargaming model, you can check out the link in the description below. Down there you will also find links for the Invasive Wargaming Discord server and the Invasive Wargaming Patreon. Really, this channel wouldn't be possible without the support of my patrons. Special thanks to Marcy, A Little Pink Monster, Bennaby Jones, Durza, Ever Keller, Robbie Goodwin, Jose Gomez, Ruger, Drew Pratley, Michael Byrne, Zealous Brimstone, Scott Heater, Stephen Cowan, Jared Egler, Chris Kessler, and Tao Oswell.